You know, a lot of people used to ask me what were my thoughts on PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, and I would normally always give the same regurgitated answer. Not enough information on it, can't tell you. However, after each passing thought, each passing day, I keep coming to the same conclusion as the game's release draws closer and closer. PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, more than likely, will be a failure. Now some of you may be asking, how can I say it's a failure? Are you really going to make another very generic bland video in which you're going to say how it's inferior to the Smash Bros. Games even though it's not even out yet? Are you really going to say that the gameplay is flawed even though we only saw at best 15 minutes tops all around the world? Are you going to be another internet prejudgmental douchebag and just go on a rant about this game? No. Actually, I think this game has potential to be on par gameplay-wise with the Smash Bros. Games. However, the way this game is marketed and being set up, this game is pretty much destined to fail. Now, before we get to why PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale will fail, I believe we must first talk about why its counterpart, Super Smash Bros. Succeeded. Now, as we all know, it's pretty much an undebatable fact that Mario, being the most popular video game character, is a pretty big draw. And as for the hardcore gamers back in the day, they remember Mario's first outing with DK, and now they want to see him go at it again. Not to mention Luigi's along for the ride as well. Mario and Luigi, maybe they have a little sibling rivalry, and you get to see it unfold in front of your hands. There is one, and we've only touched on 3 characters on this roster. Now, let's zoom out a little bit here. And the first thing you notice is, all these characters are relevant. Because if you were a fan of Mario, you probably knew about DK. You played Donkey Kong Country, you probably wanted games like it. And the Kirby games were very much like that. They had the 2-player co-op going on, going through stages, fighting bosses, having a good old time. Then you throw Pokemon like Pikachu and Jigglypuff into the mix, and let's face it, Pokemon games are still being made today. It's quite a long and historic tenure they got going there for themselves. And remember, these two were pretty much fan favorites back in the day given the anime, Ash always shocking Pikachu and Jigglypuff drawing on people's faces. Another thing that was kinda cool is if you were a Zelda fan, chances are you were a Metroid fan, and vice versa, since they have very similar styles of gameplay in the fact that you go out on a long quest to stop an evil tyrant, and you pretty much go around collecting items at your own leisure throughout the way. And I remember back when me and my friends used to pit technological advances made in the Metroid franchise with Samus' arsenal of weaponry up against Link and his shields and all of his magic. And, you know, there was even parts where we wondered, I wonder how Samus would fare in a Zelda game and vice versa. And everybody on here had a popular game, whether it be the Mario franchise, Donkey Kong Country, and let's not even talk about Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask for Link. Samus, although not having an N64 title, rode the success of Super Metroid. Many of Metroid fans saying Super Metroid is the best, hands down Metroid game that there has ever been. People who loved Kirby Superstar, Kirby 64, they're on board. Pokemon, once again, is still very popular today, so obviously it's still riding that wave of success even 2 decades later. And we still have the Star Fox and Earthbound franchises I haven't even talked about yet. And hey, you already know Captain Falcon and F-Zero is still right there in the corner. We haven't touched on him yet. And that's the magic about Nintendo. Their fan bases could overlap. You like Mario, chances are you like somebody else. You like Zelda, chances are you like Metroid. You liked F-Zero, chances are you just didn't pick out F-Zero at random because it's not one of the more popular of the first party franchises that Nintendo has brought to the table. It's just that once you play one, there's a good chance you are a fan of 2, 3, and maybe even 4, and maybe even more. Now, having them all in one place to duke it out and pit their wits and strength against each other, yeah, this is what people wanted. This was the Nintendo fanboy dream come true. And with the newer installments, although we added new characters, some of them being clones, all the characters that were implemented were relevant. And due to the overlap effect, many of us gamers weren't really programmed in our heads, well, it's not the same as every other Metroid game, so I don't want to play it, or it's not the same as a Zelda game or a Donkey Kong game. No, since there was an overlap effect and we liked all encompassing elements coming together and culminating in something special, we digged it. Unfortunately, the overlap principle doesn't apply to PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, because the games never really establish any sort of link with each other. There's no synergy. There's no resonating effect that one game then embellishes on another. Now let's actually look at the roster of this game. And right here from the get-go, from the jump street, the character roster, PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale already falls flat. because its main draw here is Kratos. But for all the people who love Kratos, love him because he's a badass, he kills things, he destroys gods, he goes on an epic quest, there's blood, gore, it's hardcore, rated M, blood and guts everywhere, sexual themes and all these type of things going on. But in this game, everything that makes Kratos Kratos is stripped from Kratos. That is why Kratos was a much bigger draw and a better fit in the game known as Mortal Kombat made by NetherRealm Studios. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's not an abundance of God of War fans out there who've just been dreaming and fathoming the fact, oh man, I wonder how my boy Kratos would throw it down against Parappa the Rappa in combat. I don't think that's how it would work. Many of the God of War fans like God of War for every reason that they wouldn't like this game. This game is too kiddish. God of War is not. Do you see the difference here? The next character I want to talk about is BioShock's Big Daddy. Every potential reason you had to like BioShock falls absent here. You loved BioShock because it was a first-person shooter, it had a great story, it had an immaculate environment, and everything about the game sucked you in. All those elements that are present in the BioShock fanbase, all the things that you liked in the BioShock games, aren't going to be here, which will push a lot of BioShock fans to not care about this game. Much else, Colonel Radek from Killzone, which is a first-person shooter, and a lot of people, and you know this is a fact, folks, people who play first-person shooters, normally these are the type of people who only play first-person shooters, and find this game to be too casual for them, if that makes any sense to you. And the same can be said for Metal Gear Solid's Raiden. And let's face it, folks, Raiden isn't even the most popular character out of the Metal Gear Solid series, nor is he the most popular Raiden, because let's face it, people who just play Mortal Kombat for Kratos know about another Raiden who was a more popular Raiden than this Raiden, because the other Raiden that I'm talking about is a guy that straw hat that goes Raiden wins. Which basically beckons the question, where's the poster child of the Metal Gear Solid franchise? Where's Snake? That's who people want to see. That's the big draw. And then you have characters like Alan Wake that pride themselves on realism. And now, I'm supposed to think that a realistic Alan Wake character is going to tangle with the likes of Kratos and Big Daddy and even stand a chance. And no, I understand some of you are like, well, this is supposed to be a crossover type thing. But here's the thing, none of the Nintendo franchises in Brawl have anything to do with realism. They're all some type of fantasy world. Now for the Alan Wake fans out there that love the series due to it staying true to realism, those people are just going to find that whole fantasy element as a deterrent to play this game. And this game likes to pride itself on the best matchups ever, and the only legitimate matchup I can possibly fathom seeing here is Ratchet and Clank versus Jak and Daxter. Yes, that's cool, but I can't say I saw, man, where's my Big Daddy fighting Parappa the Rapper? Oh, where's Honey Boo Boo fighting Hayachi? And don't even get me started on Hayachi, I think he's the worst fit on this game, and here's why. The fighting game community as a whole looks down, spits on, and doesn't care about games like this because they're too casual and are quote-unquote not real fighting games and are not completely accepted within the fighting game community. And I know some of you thinking, well, Tekken's Hayachi was in Soul Calibur 5, so why isn't it okay for this game? It's because Soul Calibur 5 is kind of like Tekken in the regards that it is a 3D fighter. 3D fighters have relatively high difficulty curves, and that's what they like. Doing a 2-button combination to do pretty much everything in the game is pretty lame given the standards of Tekken Tag Tournament 2, Dead or Alive 5, Soul Calibur 5 with their complicated and complex systems. This is almost a slap in the face to this guy. And then you have this guy who hasn't been relevant since 2005, which was a remake of a thing that hasn't been relevant since 1998. Now we all remember Twisted Metal's Sweet Tooth, right? Yeah, remember him? What was Twisted Metal's memo again? Oh yeah, that's right. Be grotesque, be sinister, be dark, go places that other games dare not to. That was part of Twisted Metal's charm. None of that will be relevant in this game due to the fact that it's rated T. That's another thing about Super Smash Bros. That made the game relevant. None of the characters had to lighten up. None of the characters had to change. None of the characters had to do anything uncharacteristic that they wouldn't normally do. And then you have other characters like Toro, who hasn't even seen a US release, so a lot of people in the US aren't going to know who he is. Then you have Spike, who, let's face it, wasn't even a main character throughout the whole franchise's tenure. Sly Cooper, for the most part, is irrelevant. A big draw would have been Dante. However, yeah. Ninja Theory royally pissed off every original Devil May Cry fan that has any knowledge of the things they've said about the original Devil May Cry and are doing with the new one. And Heavenly Swords Nariko is only in this game for the eye candy aspect because Honey Boo Boo down there wasn't going to get the job done. And with that said, the only other reason why they could possibly be in there is because Ninja Theory worked on Heavenly Sword and they are now working on the Devil May Cry reboot. The saddest part about this is that a lot of the characters of the big draws are going to be toned down to satisfy this T rating. A lot of the characters that are popular and more well known are still irrelevant since they haven't had a game in who knows how long. None of the matchups are even really interesting and thrilling to think about, not to mention one character shouldn't even belong in the whole thing, Hayachi. And one of your should-be biggest draws has lost pretty much all fan support from the fan base. So even if the gameplay of this game is actually good, many of the people who would buy it for their character are going to be turned off by the fact that it's not what their character is supposed to do. And that's a really hard circumstance to overlook when there's no fan base overlap. And essentially would lead to a lot of people that actually buy this game only to buy it for 2 or 3 characters. And I'm the Black Prion, and that's why I believe that PlayStation's All-Stars Battle Royale, too long of a title for not good enough of a game. Now, will it be as good gameplay-wise? Maybe. But as for perks and the reason to actually go out and get the game, I'm just not feeling it, man.